Okay, let's get started. I'd like to introduce the speakers for today. Eve Abrams has been the director of TaxTalent's mentor program since 2013 and was a senior recruiter with Tax Search for almost 18 years. Her role is to connect tax professionals with tax mentors who can assist them with specific career development need at the specific time. Eve will be presenting the factors that have led us into today's market conditions, which we're calling the perfect storm. Adam Golden has spent over 13 years at Tax Search, helping companies build and maintain world-class tax departments. Over the years, Adam has developed an expertise in consulting with hiring authorities on the intricacies of the tax market and has established himself as one of the premier consultants on a myriad of tax HR-related issues such as retention, compensation, succession planning, development, and recruitment. A career coach, today he'll focus on the effects of today's market on tax professionals, as well as how mentors can advise their mentees to help them make solid career decisions. And last but certainly not least, Al Pisanelli. Al is the Director of Global Corporate Tax for the Vanguard Group, which is the largest mutual fund company in North America. He has over 30 years of corporate tax experience, beginning his career with PwC. Al served as president of the TEI Philadelphia chapter in 2014-2015, and also the chair of the National TEI State and Local Tax Committee. Al will give us a view into his tax department's mentor program and talk about its challenges and effectiveness. So Eve, first, I'm sure everyone's curious, how did the title of this webinar, Advising Mentees in a Perfect Storm, come about?
Well, first, thank you, Jennifer. It's really great to be here today. To answer your question, an assortment of factors have come together, kind of like cold and warm fronts merging to make a serious storm or tornado. Of course, we know weather conditions pass somewhat quickly, but our perfect storm seems to be here for a while. So that's how we came up with the name. To go into more details, first let's look at TaxTalent's 2015 Hiring Outlook Survey. It is packed with highly useful information. The respondents for this survey were all heads of U.S. corporate tax departments. And it shows us that 69% of the respondents said they will be hiring in 2015. This is a 28% increase from last year's survey results. So we know there's going to be a huge increase in the amount of hiring that is happening now and will continue to happen throughout this year and beyond. Of this hiring, 89% will be at the mid-manager level and below, and 12% at the director level and above, which is, by the way, a 50% increase over last year's hiring at the upper levels. 2014 was right at 8%. So reasons for this come from many directions. First, we all know there are baby boomers retiring right and left. There are literally thousands of baby boomers retiring each month across the U.S., and of course the tax profession is like other professions. We're seeing this in tax departments across the country. Also, we're in a growing economy, which has resulted in significant corporate growth. There are other factors as well, a demand like never before for sophisticated tax planning due to a business world that is growing more and more complex, plus new tax law changes and regulations. All of these have created a need for some tax departments to open up new positions. Also, we see tax departments going from contract employees to hiring permanent employees, tax department reorganizations, possibly a company's merger or acquisition. I mean, I could go on and on. The reasons for this perfect storm are coming at us from a lot of different places. Next, 97% of the respondents, and again, we're talking the heads of U.S. tax departments said they believe it will be anywhere from moderately difficult to very difficult to staff their tax departments this year. This makes it a really tough situation for these hiring authorities. They know we are in a candidate-driven market. There are more jobs than there are viable candidates. Respondents are also concerned that their compensation levels are not up to market standards. I can assure you all of these factors are causing a lot of stress out there.
Well, that makes a lot of sense on the demand side. And I'm wondering, Eve, about the supply side. With the public release of the Career Satisfaction Survey just days away, how does that relate to the perfect storm?
Well, it definitely adds in. 62% of the respondents, they were at the staff to manager level, indicated they do not believe their tax departments understood their career goals, or they don't trust their department to help them achieve their career goals. This is a 10% increase over last year's survey results. So this concern, there's not any improvement here. In fact, it's going the other direction. Again, the number one reason for dissatisfaction of tax professionals is their lack of career development. To add to this, the results also showed us that mentoring in the workplace is important, or even very important, to 98% of the respondents. So mentoring is like a key factor in this whole career development picture. Unfortunately, we know that the vast majority of companies out there do not have formal development or mentoring programs. So there's a huge gap between what's needed, what employees really want, and what currently exists. So the last thing here I do want to mention is that the respondents said they are less likely to stay, or even much less likely to stay in their current job. So the bottom line is we have a hiring issue and a retention issue. This is not good for heads of tax departments in 2015. You know, the uninformed observer might say, well, that seems simple. There's a big need by employers and a big supply of unhappy employees. But, you know, it doesn't work that way. It's not a simple issue, and there's not a simple answer. In a frenzied candidates market like this, it's not uncommon for hiring to result in mismatches and poor hires. Both candidates and employers can be very vulnerable in a market like this. So there we have it, the perfect storm.
Well, that certainly makes a ton of sense on the supply side, too, and it's quite interesting. Adam, I'm curious from your perspective, what have you seen in the market? What would you advise mentors knowing what mentees are currently facing?
Yeah, really good question. And again, thanks for having me on. Glad to be with you guys today as well. You know, the first piece of advice I would offer mentors is just really a recognition of what's going on in the market. I mean, the mentors out there need to recognize that, you know, if you have a mentee that is at that manager level or below, or even at the director level, given the 50% increase in director level hiring, you know, these people are likely getting calls about jobs, or they're seeing many more job postings for positions that could match their background. And, you know, depending upon the level, you know, these people could be getting inundated with, you know, with requests from recruiters or seeing job postings or whatnot. And as Eve discussed, you know, since there are so many people, you know, at that manager level and below that are going to be in demand from the hiring side of the fence, we also know that that's where a large number of the mentees tend to lie. So, you know, just a realization of what's going on in the market right now and the fact that these people are getting a lot of calls, it should be something that the mentors are having discussions with their mentees about, and making sure that the mentees aren't getting what I call the grass is greener syndrome. And this is where basically the person could think that they're going to be better off making a job move, only to regret the situation later because the decision to make the move wasn't well thought out. You know, I advise candidates all the time when I'm talking to them, either recruiting them or if someone just calls me and asks me for career advice, that, you really need to make sure that you have a legitimate reason to make a move to begin with, and that you're not knee-jerk reacting to something that happened at your company, or not getting a promotion or a bonus, or something along those lines. What I've found in my over 13 years here is, the more emotional reaction that you have to something, and if you're making a move for that kind of an emotional reaction, it can really lead to not thinking out things from a long-term perspective. So you could make a move for a short-term reason, but long-term it could be a bad decision. If there's a legitimate reason for someone to make a move, the mentor then should have the candidate go through the mental exercise of, kind of understanding what their career needs or their must-haves are from their wants, or the things that they would like to see, but they don't necessarily have to have. That way, when a candidate in this kind of candidate-driven market is looking at multiple jobs, they're not comparing one job to another. They're comparing those jobs to their own personal career needs and wants. It's like the control portion of an experiment, and the jobs are the variables. If you compare one job to another, their situation, their location, the job responsibilities, the industries, all of those variables, it can be hard to distinguish which is better from one another. But if the control is the candidate's needs and wants, the job that matches all of the needs and as many of the wants as you can find will be the best job, and it makes it a better overall fit, and that is the job that ultimately, if the mentee is going to make a move, the one that they should probably accept.
Well, that really sounds like good advice, Adam. And if we shift the conversation towards the topic of development, how would you advise our mentors within the mentee program to handle this topic with the market like it is right now?
Yeah, development's really key, and we are going to have the career satisfaction survey coming out, and the whole issue around career satisfaction is it is complex and multidimensional. The biggest piece of advice I can offer mentees or mentors who are advising their mentees, is to really for the mentee to take personal ownership over their career. It's one thing for the people at the manager level and below to say that they're not happy and they're not getting the development they want and whatnot. What we don't know within that data point, though, is how many of those same people that aren't happy are really taking ownership and being aggressive about understanding where their own career is headed, and doing the things proactively that they can do to seek out that mentoring that maybe they're not getting from their company. And as Al will talk about in a minute, he works at a company that happens to have a mentor program, but his company is the anomaly in the market. So the onus is on the individual to understand where their career is headed and to ultimately continually work towards that goal. This means that the mentor should advise the mentees to sit down. We recommend doing it multiple times per year, at least twice per year, and evaluate themselves and evaluate where their career is headed and what their ultimate goal is. The mentor and mentee should also have very frank and honest discussions about what the mentee needs to work on in order to achieve their career objectives. The easiest example is, if the mentee says they want to be a head of tax in 5 years, well, the mentor needs to sit down and have an honest discussion about the areas where the mentee needs to develop in order to get to that level. And that could even mean that the 5-year time frame needs to be pushed out because there's some things that needs to be worked on or whatnot. But then a plan has to be put in place in order to achieve that goal. So the next time you're meeting, you're looking at that bottleneck and the biggest thing that you were tackling in order to achieve that, your career goal. Did you overcome that? And what's the next thing you need to work on? When you put the plan in place, make sure that you have measurable steps that achieve that bottleneck. And if you haven't achieved that bottleneck within the current time frame, you continue to work on that until you get past it. You don't move on to something else. If a mentor and mentee are doing these things on a regular basis, when the phone calls do come in to the mentee, when they do see other opportunities that are out there, and believe me, these things are going to happen, as I mentioned before, the mentee will be in a better position to evaluate whether an opportunity really is worth listening to and considering. this will keep the mentees from reacting to things in an emotional state or knee-jerk reacting. And if they do decide to make a move and they do decide that it's time to move on, it will be a well-thought-out decision and have a very high likelihood of being both a good short-term fit but also a good long-term fit.
That makes sense. So, Eve, you guys both have spoke on the kind of scenarios, if you will, that employers have with the options that exist when it comes in terms of a mentor program within the workplace. What are those options, and what scenarios do employers have as far as offering their employees development and mentoring?
Well, ideally, the listeners are all in companies where they have a fully developed mentor or career development program. But unfortunately, there's not really many companies that do that. We've talked about that here. So either a company has a partially formed program, maybe the tax department and HR work together to put some kind of program together, but there's gaps. And then, of course, there's companies that have nothing, and there's a lot of those out there. So the main point I want to stress here is that there are so many resources available, with the Internet. There's literally thousands of development programs and all kinds of resources out there that companies can go to, like a tax director that really wants to fill in those gaps. It takes some time, it takes commitment and some time to do this, but looking outside the company and what resources can they bring in. Our website is a perfect example of this, like our mentor program. We really designed this either for individuals to use or for tax departments to integrate it in with their programs. And there's many other aspects of our website that could provide offerings, like the tax training events section that lists all the tax continuing education events across the country that are available. Also, our news feed that can be individualized for like a tax professional that wants to be kept aware of a particular issue that the company's facing. So, there are a lot of options out there. Another example, let's say a director of tax really has an excellent tax manager, but the person needs some development in making presentations and in speaking to groups of people. Simple solutions are like Toastmasters International. They're pretty much everywhere, and I can speak from my own experience. My employer suggested that I do that, and I did a year attending Toastmasters, and it has made a huge difference in my speaking abilities, and it has opened new doors for me. So there's all kinds of possibilities out there. So we can't just look within the company. We may have to reach out and find whatever is out there that's going to be a best fit for the needs of the employees of a particular department.
Got it. Now, Al, it's my understanding that you have a formal program in place at Vanguard. I would love for you to give us an overview of the program that you have developed within your tax department.
I can go into what we've developed. When I first got to Vanguard, we had a very serious problem of retaining talent. The CFO was looking for ideas on how to retain talent, and we really wanted our division to be a talent destination. We started to discuss that, and I had come up with a number of things that we could do to retain talent, and I think part of that was developing, although Vanguard did not have a formal mentoring program, I find that basically mentoring sometimes, if it's too formal, it can be it doesn't become a natural fit. Whereas if you're mentoring people and they're people that you're really concerned about because you're looking for them to develop, I think that becomes a much more natural fit for you, and I think that it becomes a much more dynamic process at that point in time. So we basically took some things that were already established at Vanguard. Vanguard always had a program where we were, as managers, you were required to have one-on-ones with your people. I added that we should have one-on-ones at a minimum of once a month. And those one-on-one sessions then provide the manager with time to spend with their individual contributors to basically go over what they're doing, how they're doing, and basically then to see what areas they're working in that they need additional help in, how to develop them personally, professionally, and so on. So I found that that was a very crucial leg in developing this entire program. I also instilled in our division the use of what I would call a personal plan. We developed a system to put in personal plans for every individual. Those personal plans revolved around departmental goals, divisional goals, personal goals, and we looked at that from managing people, managing operations, managing relationships, and then personal development. So we used the personal plan and the one-on-ones to kind of focus people and to help develop their careers within Vanguard. And so, and that has proven to be pretty successful. We've gone from, at least in the area of corporate tax, we were a destination, we weren't even a destination. Tax was looked as a black box. Today I get at least three emails a month for people that want to get informationals and want to do rotations within our corporate tax department, because it's grown to where people feel that if there's something going on in corporate tax, all these people are developing, they're happy, they seem to be working better, and they want to know what it is. So I get all these various requests for people to do rotations within our corporate tax group. So I think that the overall methodology is working and taking hold. I guess I'll stop at this point in time and ask, does anybody have any questions that they might want to pose?
Comment. That's excellent. Excellent what you just shared with us.
Yeah, that we really do appreciate that, Alan. It sounds, like it's really working, and we're hopeful that, at least at TaxTalent and Tax Search, we can do our part to kind of connect the dots for some of the people who have had similar situations to yours. I do have a couple of questions that the audience has polled, so I'll take the time now to kind of switch focus to the question and answer section. Again, thanking all three of you, Adam, Al, and Eve, tremendously for all of this information. The first question was not to a specific person, but anybody who'd want to take it. As a candidate currently looking for an opportunity, I do not see this high demand. I encounter feedback that I am overqualified. It appears that the employers are filling needs at the lowest possible level. Are there details as to the experience level of these high-demand candidates? Are there talent gaps left by the baby boomers being filled internally and therefore staff is being moved up?
I mean, I think the more there's a general pyramid effect that happens as you move up. I'm sure Al can speak to this as well, but there are far more senior analysts, and manager positions out there than there are director, senior director, VP level positions. So, overall, you're going to see a larger volume of positions available at that level. The numbers also indicate it from our our hiring survey were, still 80% of the available job, or not available, but of the expected jobs to be hired in 2015 were still at that manager level and below. So I think clearly there is a higher demand for positions at that level. It's not all doom and gloom, though. We did see a 50% increase in the demand level for director level positions and above. This is a direct impact, we believe, on a lot of the regulatory pressures that are out there, particularly on the international side of the fence with all the BEPS and OECD stuff and country-by-country reporting. And, those areas are areas that require a higher level of skill set to figure out how to tackle those problems and whatnot on the international side of the fence. There is certainly movement with baby boomers beginning to retire. I don't think that we have yet started to really feel the big crunch on the baby boomer retirement. As Eve mentioned, this is a perfect storm that is going to be here for a while, and I certainly think that we'll start to see more and more movement with more baby boomers retiring, but we are starting to see more of them now that the economy has rebounded. The stock market largely has, recouped a lot of the losses from, from 08, 09, and 2010 and whatnot. So we're seeing more of the boomers start to retire. I think another part of the question is, what are companies doing to address that? In a lot of cases, they are looking to hire someone, kind of at that next generation group behind them, the Gen Xers. The problem you have there is the Gen Xer population overall in society is half the size of the baby boomers. And we didn't even get our fair share of those folks because of all of the stuff that was going on when a lot of these people were coming into the profession with, the WorldComs and the Enrons and the Tycos and everything. And if you remember back to that period of time, they were talking about a flat tax and things like that. So people were discouraged for going into tax. So, tax didn't even get their half, their half of or their percentage of the Gen Xers, that may have gone into tax in general. So there is a big steep drop off there, which means companies are possibly looking at more junior level folks to possibly hire for those positions. Obviously, budgets are tight, and they're, rather than paying for someone with more experience and paying for that level, if they feel like they can get someone that is bright and has upside and they're able to do it cheaper, we are seeing that there are companies that are looking at that. If you are more experienced, what does all of this mean for you, I guess, is kind of the bottom line on it. We are finding that the more progressive companies are still looking at, baby boomers who still want to work, who might be able to still come in and contribute for 3 or 4 or 5 more years before they retire or whatnot. And, I would encourage, if you find yourself kind of in that pool, when you interview, you need to demonstrate that you have really, you need to demonstrate that you have a high energy level, that you are not opposed to rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. That can be a perception issue sometimes, that the higher level folks with more experience had rather oversee and manage and not do the work. Also, the whole idea of working as an independent contractor and kind of starting your own consulting practice. We are seeing a huge increase in the number of companies that are interested in our bridge staffing service, where we help independent contractors get placed in positions, and a large number of these folks are baby boomers who, for whatever reason, don't want to work on a full-time basis or aren't able to find a full-time job, but they're able to stay busy, over a year's time or 2 years' time or whatever, doing, consulting projects and things like that. So those are some options for you.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Adam. I mean, I think more progressive companies are looking for good quality people and experienced people. I mean, I think what you have to demonstrate and you have to really show is that you do have a high energy level, that you're detailed oriented, that you do like rolling up your sleeves. And I think that goes a long way in convincing a potential employer that this candidate is worth consideration in that process. And maybe even gets them to look away from looking at a more junior person who, by the way, is going to need supervision and is going to need a lot of hand-holding, at least initially, to get them over some issues. So depending on their issues, I think that I think you can demonstrate that you add much more value than anyone else can because of your experience. So.
The only thing I was going to add is, as you were talking, Al, was I think if you can also find someone to be able to tell your story, whether that's an advisor that knows the company or whether that's a recruiter like myself who would recruit you and present you to a client, just sending your resume in through an HR, through a LinkedIn or through some kind of an HR system or whatnot, you're likely to get screened out just based upon what comes up on the resume in terms of years of experience and things like that. If you can have someone be able to tell your story and market you to a company, I think it also puts you in a little bit more of an advantageous situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Adam and Al. That's a wonderful answer. I'm sure that you've heard that before, but that was great information for myself personally as well. Now, this one can be to Adam, and Al, you can give your 2 cents as well. I am a director within a tax department, and this all sounds great, but the reality is we don't have time. How can we accomplish this development that you're saying needs to be done with little time and little support from leadership?
The whole time factor, everybody's stretched. So this is a universal issue that I hear all the time. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's why I like the personal plans and the periodic one-on-one sessions. You have to meet with your people anyway to go over things that they're working on. You can blend in what meeting with your people and discussing things that they're working on with mentoring and with developing their personal plans. And I think that what will happen is you'll end up having people that really have a sense that my manager cares about what I'm doing and about my development, and I think that you'll see benefits from that, and you'll want to spend more time with them. You may not have that time to spend, but I think we could all eke out another, half hour, 45 minutes a week if you start seeing those types of results. So I think that you have to make the time, and that sounds very easy to do and very cliche, but I don't know of any other way of doing it. But like I said, we all do meet with people, and we all do try to find out exactly what's going on with a particular issue or problem. And I think you can weave in the mentoring in that time period. And maybe it's not ideal, but at least it's a start.
So maybe we shouldn't refer to it as, like this is going to take extra time, but to think in terms of integrating it into other things that are happening with in the tax department.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not ideal, but it's at least a start in getting in at least getting some some plan in place for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on a couple of things that Al talked about. One, when you talked about the benefit that you'll get from it, I can tell you as someone whose job it is to talk about candidates making job moves and recruiting for a living, my red flag goes up very high whenever I talk to a candidate about who their mentor is, and I find out that their mentor happens to be their current boss. One of the added benefits will be, that person, you will be that person's sounding board, the person that they're going to come to for advice. It gives you much more of an insight into, what's going on with that person, and if they are thinking of making a job move or they do come in and tell you they're resigning, you're in a much better position from a counseling perspective and counteroffer position to influence that person that may be leaving. And for me, there has to be a pretty compelling reason why the person wants to make a job change. If I find out that they're getting development by their current boss, or their current boss is their mentor, or someone that they have in their circle of influence, because I know how strong of a tie that is. I've seen it time and time again, where offers are made and those people are, less likely to leave. That's one point. The other point that that I think Al, brought up was, for him, the mentoring and the development, it was a priority. Al didn't find extra time to do it, as he said. He incorporated it within the general meetings he was going to have because it was a high priority to him. And this is one thing that, again, it's cliche to say you have to make the time to do it, but if you really think about, there's three elements that when I talk to my clients about retention, we talk about development, we talk about compensation, and we talk about work-life balance. Those tend to be the three big things that candidates over and over and over talk about being important to them. Out of those three things, you have the most control over how much your people get developed. At the end of the day, we all know budgets are really tight. We all know that compensation is limited. We can only do so much with what we can pay people. At the end of the day, work-life balance is what it is. The work has to get done. We have limited resources that we can either tap into from outside the organization or the ability to add headcount. That there's a limit on what you can do there. But the time that you're able to find and to make development a priority is where you have the most control. It's the one thing that you can really make an impact on. And as the career satisfaction will show you whenever those results come out, it's the number one area where the candidates that is the most impactful to the candidate. So you actually have control over the thing that the candidates want the most. So, to the extent that you can get creative like Al has done with, trying to incorporate mentoring with other meetings or things like that, I think you will see huge dividends on your retention, huge dividends on the quality of the work that comes out of your folks. And, as Al said, once you start seeing the momentum of someone getting better, it only fuels itself so that you want to meet with that person more. You want to continue to see them develop.
Yep, I agree.
Perfect. Well, guys, we're about out of time. Again, thank you to you, Al, Adam, and Eve. You guys have really done a wonderful job and helped us in mentorship and development and seeing a little bit of clarity as it relates to all of those things. And we thank you for attending the webinar today. Added development, I'd check out TaxTalent.com and the mentor program if you haven't already. If there's anything that we can help you with, please reach out to Eve. She's here to help you find whatever it is you're looking for. And again, if it's to get further guidance on one of the questions that you posed, certainly reach out after this webinar. We are going to be sending you an email with the link to the webinar and with the newsletter that we're releasing for the mentor program that Eve is releasing. So you guys will have some additional resources at your disposal. And again, thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.